If the United States ever failed to pay its debt, the world economy wouldn't just slow down, it would implode. Within 48 hours, markets would vanish, banks would freeze, and every dollar in circulation would lose its meaning. Because what we call U.S. debt isn't just a government number. It's the invisible framework holding up modern civilization, the trust that shapes everything from mortgages to grocery prices, and if that trust ever breaks, the collapse wouldn't just hit America, it would shake the entire planet. But before we imagine the fall, we have to understand how this system was built and how the richest nation in history became the most indebted. It all began in 1790. A young country, fresh from revolution, drowning in war loans. Most nations would have defaulted. But Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary, had a radical idea. He didn't reject the debt. He embraced it. Hamilton believed that by borrowing money and paying it back on time, America would prove it could be trusted. That trust became its greatest asset. Investors bought in, confidence grew, and soon, American bonds were being traded across Europe. A nation that had fought for freedom now financed its future, not through conquest, but through credibility. From that moment on, debt became America's engine of growth. The railroads, the industrial boom, the New Deal, even World War II, all of it was powered by borrowed money. And each time, the U.S. didn't just survive, it got stronger. By the mid-20th century, that financial power ruled the world. In 1944, as World War II raged on, 44 nations gathered in Bretton Woods to build a new global economy. Their solution? Anchor every major currency to the U.S. dollar and the dollar to gold. The world's money was now built on America's promise. After the war, the U.S. held 2/3 of the world's gold and half its industrial output. The dollar became untouchable. Foreign nations stored it, traded with it, and trusted it more than their own currencies. American debt became the world's savings account, but trust never stays untested. By the late 1960s, the Vietnam War and huge domestic spending drained U.S. gold reserves. Nations began demanding gold instead of paper. So in 1971, President Nixon made a decision that changed everything. He ended the dollar's link to gold. From that moment, money was no longer backed by anything physical. Its value depended entirely on confidence and on America's ability to keep paying its debts. That decision created the world we live in today, a debt-based system where used treasuries replaced gold as the foundation of global finance. Banks, pension funds, and central banks all built their stability on one belief: that U.S. bonds are risk-free, and that belief has never truly been tested. Every time old bonds mature, the U.S. simply issues new ones. The debt is never repaid, it's rolled over forever. As long as this ritual continues, the illusion of stability holds. But if that chain ever breaks, if a single payment is missed, everything falls apart. In 1979, a small technical glitch delayed Treasury payments for just a few days. Interest rates spiked immediately, and the shock rippled for years. In 2011, when Congress nearly failed to raise the debt ceiling, the U.S. credit rating was downgraded and global markets lost trillions within weeks. Those weren't financial crashes, they were cracks in faith. Because the global economy runs on one simple assumption, that the United States will always pay its debt. That assumption has turned debt into America's greatest export. Other nations trade goods. America trades promises, and the world keeps buying. But here's the paradox. The U.S. doesn't need to eliminate its debt. It needs to maintain it. Because the entire world depends on those bonds for safety. If Washington ever tried to pay everything off, the system itself would collapse. Debt isn't America's weakness, it's the product it sells. But even trust has limits. In 2025, U.S. debt passed $38 trillion, and the annual interest payments alone neared $1 trillion, almost equal to the entire defense budget. The government now borrows money just to pay interest on the money it already borrowed. At the same time, politics has turned the debt ceiling into a weapon. Every standoff shakes investor confidence. China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia are cutting back on used treasuries. Central banks are quietly returning to gold. And nations like Brazil and India are exploring trade systems that bypass the dollar altogether. For the first time in half a century, the world's faith in U.S. debt is showing cracks, not because America lacks wealth, but because it lacks unity. And in a system built on trust, division is the deadliest threat. Because if the U.S. ever truly defaulted, Even once, the collapse wouldn't look dramatic at first. It would start as a delay, a technical issue, but behind the scenes, every trading desk, every algorithm, every central bank would know the unthinkable had happened. The safest asset on earth would no longer be safe. Within hours, banks would freeze, lending would halt, and the dollar would plummet. Interest rates would skyrocket. Credit cards, mortgages, and business loans would become unaffordable overnight. Within days, the entire global economy would flatline. Because in the end, America doesn't just print money, it prints trust. And trust is the one currency no nation can counterfeit or borrow back once it has gone. History has seen this before. Rome had its silver denarius. Britain had its pound. Every empire believed its money would last forever, until belief itself disappeared. And that's how empires really fall, not through invasion but through indifference. Not with explosions, but with hesitation. When the world quietly stops believing. Today the US still stands, its bonds still sell, its dollar still dominates. But every crisis leaves a scar. Every political fight, every downgrade, every delay slowly erodes the foundation of faith. Because the truth is simple and terrifying. The world doesn't run on money. It runs on trust. And once that trust is gone, no empire, no matter how powerful, can ever buy it back. If this story gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe, because history doesn't just repeat itself. It warns us.